So one of the main promises of the Trump presidency was obviously to repeal Obamacare, to repeal and replace Obamacare. That was Trump's message. That has always been Trump's message. Where as many Republicans, basically all Republicans, at some point have at least talked about the failings of the Affordable Care Act, the of Obamacare, if you will. Um, and many of them, most of them, have said that they would support a full repeal of the bill. Of course, Trump has pushed repeal and replace. He still wants to see, uh, government involvement in the healthcare system to some degree in that regard. But he definitely wants to see the current system of Obamacare torn down and basically put in place in a different way. And Trump himself, for whatever reason, has put himself in an odd position because he has supported legislation, but then turned around and then basically said that he was against it. And it's an odd situation. So when the first Obamacare repeal and replace bill was being put forward, it was basically set up by Paul Ryan, sort of behind closed doors, and as details were starting to leak out from members of Congress about what was actually in the bill, it became pretty clear that it was horrendous and that it was basically going to still be Obamacare. So obviously that was horrible, and the bill, because of this, obviously Democrats hated it because they thought it was going to be a repeal of Obamacare, and it was just going to be bad for the healthcare system. And then also Republicans knew that it was actually going to keep in place Obamacare, so they were against it because of that. So you had this situation where this was a bill that was extremely unpopular, and they actually pulled the bill on the House right before they were going to vote for it, because they knew that, well, they weren't going to have the votes for it. And Trump has toyed around with the idea of letting Obamacare continue and letting Obamacare fail as an option, but he did sort of tacitly support the first bill as it was being put forward, and then pulled. And then he after this bill failed, he was talking about just letting Obamacare continue and letting Obamacare fail. Then the Congress came back. They started over, again. They brought up a new bill that actually did wind up passing the House, and it was a bill that Trump supported again. But then once it, started making its way to the Senate, to be changed and tweaked and to have the Senate's input on it, he began to say that the bill was quote unquote mean, which was just an odd statement. So Trump's original message was always repeal and replace. Since being president, he's kind of gone a little bit all over the place. Healthcare is a very complex, thing. It's like 1/6 of our economy or something like that. And there are, tons of different, ideas that people have about how to best, implement the healthcare system in the United States. How to make it better. So, it's a very complex thing, and who knows? I mean, obviously Trump's not, some sort of expert, on really many different things. I mean, he's a businessman, so he's not, he hasn't really been involved, knee deep in politics, and he hasn't sort of dug in on many of these issues to that degree. So it may very well be that he didn't fully understand what was actually in the bill, as it was going through the process. Both these bills, as they were going through the process, the first one that got pulled, and now this one that has passed the House. So it's definitely been a weird situation. And the bill that did pass the House, that bill was, again, largely Obamacare. It kept many of the regulations. It did get rid of the individual mandate, the employer mandate. It got rid of some of the taxes. I think it may have even chipped away at a couple of the regulations. But many of the core regulatory structure of Obamacare was in place. It still had a backdoor mandate for insurance companies. There were tax credits, refundable tax credits, meaning that people who didn't actually earn the money would actually be getting basically free money in tax credits, other people's money. So it's still just subsidies by another name, and it also set up a giant pool for insurance companies, pool of money for insurance companies, something like $200 billion, I believe. It still allowed for expansions in Medicaid. In some cases, it added, so it added money for Medicaid. It was still Obamacare in many, many ways. And the Republicans have absolutely leaned on the idea that they were going to repeal and replace Obamacare. It's been one of their core promises. Many of them used that issue to get elected or re-elected in many cases, like Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader. And now we have this whole Obamacare situation is sort of coming to a head. And this is from CNBC. Senate votes to start debate on Obamacare repeal as Pence is forced to break tie. As Mike Pence was forced to break the tie again. He also had to be the tie-breaking vote when Betsy DeVos was named as the head of the Department of Education. Vice President Mike Pence was forced to break a tie as the Senate voted 51-50 to start debate on proposals to change the landmark healthcare law. The vote comes after weeks of setbacks for Republicans as party divisions stalled multiple versions of their plans to overhaul the American healthcare system. Passing the motion to proceed does not mean Republicans have a consensus on a bill that can pass. The procedural vote starts a complicated period in which senators will float varying alternatives for reshaping Obamacare. Senators Susan Collins, Republican Maine, a Republican in name only, fully, Susan Collins, she literally might as well be a Democrat. She loves Obamacare, she thinks it's great. And Lisa Murkowski, Republican Alaska, who have pushed for a bipartisan Obamacare fix, opposed the motion to proceed. So we all saw this coming from Susan Collins, but not that it's good, of course. If you're you claim to be a Republican, this is the Obamacare should be something you are absolutely against. But with Lisa Murkowski, the situation is a little bit different because she actually voted on a 2015 repeal bill that was put through the House and Senate, but then vetoed by President Obama, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. So voters absolutely need to hold old Lisa Murkowski's feet to the fire because of her, it had to be tie broken by Mike Pence. So bad, Lisa Murkowski. The return of Senator John McCain, Republican Arizona, to the Senate on Tuesday after a surgery for a brain tumor meant it would have taken 3 no votes to block the motion. And again, there's 52 Republican senators in the Senate. Those 2 Republican senators, quote unquote Republican senators, did not. They opposed the motion to proceed. So because of that, it had to be tie broken. After the vote, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said, quote, "This is just the beginning," and added that he did not want to, quote, "spark the football." I mean, that guy can't even talk. It's hard. No one knows what he said. The Kentucky Republican said he hopes to have a measure that can pass the Senate and advance the House or to the House or a conference between the House and Senate by the, quote, "end of the week." We are pleased to have been able to take the first step in that direction, he said. The Senate will navigate a complicated path to reach any agreement. One possible route could end with a so-called skinny repeal, according to MBS News, which cited two Senate sources. The quote skinny repeal would eliminate the individual mandate penalty, the employer mandate penalty, and the medical device tax from the Affordable Care Act, according to NBC. So basically, that would take out the mandates, many of the taxes, but it would leave in place basically many of the regulations, which the regulations themselves are some of the key reasons. Many of the key failures of Obamacare can be attributed to the regulations for sure. There's the failure of Obamacare is vast and total in its scale and scope. So it just every aspect of it is a failure in one way. It was designed to be that way, but the regulations absolutely are key, and there is a case to be made that if you actually get rid of the taxes and the mandates, which are essentially the funding mechanism of Obamacare, the majority of the regulations, that could actually cause an acceleration of the death spiral, as it's called, in the healthcare market. So that could actually be bad, for sure. Before that could happen, the Senate would, quote, move on to debate and vote on a variety of approaches to the bill. Like the repeal bill and replace later plan that key conservatives support, NBC reported, that would likely get blocked. Yes, the repeal now and replace later. That was the bill basically that was put forward in 2015. It would repeal the most. It would basically be the skinny repeal, and as well as much of the regulations, many of the regulations rather, but it would basically give them 2 years to sort of replace it. So that's how it's different than the skinny repeal. The latest version of the replacement plan is expected to include amendments from both Senator Ted Cruz, Republican Texas, and Rob Portman, Republican Ohio, according to NBC. Cruz's amendment would allow insurers to sell skimpier plans as long as they also offer Obamacare compliant plans. Portman's tweak would tack on $100 billion in additional Medicaid spending, according to NBC. Great. As the Congressional Budget Office has scored neither of those amendments, the tweaks may not comply with Senate rules that allow a simple majority, NBC reported. Republicans, therefore, would not be able to get 8 Democratic votes needed to reach 60 votes. So it's these weird, sort of arcane laws that are set up. You to be able to do a full repeal of Obamacare with all the regulations, you would basically need 60 votes. So you would need 8 Democratic senators to vote for it, which is obviously never going to happen. So they have to do it through the budget reconciliation process, so-called, which means they can repeal parts of the bill that do affect the budget, which is why they can't touch the regulations, because supposedly the regulations don't affect the budget. It's unsure exactly whether or not the regulations can or can't be added into the reconciliation process. It's sort of murky. But definitely there is the argument that you couldn't repeal at least some regulations through the reconciliation process. So that's why they would need 60 votes to repeal the whole of Obamacare, and why they put forward the quote-unquote skinny repeal, which would, again, just get rid of the mandate and the taxes, but could cause its own problems. And that brings me to 2015. There was a repeal bill that was put forward, one that was not quite the same as the skinny bill, a little bit different, and all Republican senators voted for it. It passed the House, it passed the Senate, it made its way, an Obamacare repeal bill, and it made its way to Obama, who vetoed it. And now we've got a Republican president, one who said he's actually willing to sign a bill, and now the the members of Congress and the House and the Senate aren't nearly as willing to put forward even the same bill. The replacement bill that they're putting forward now is nowhere close to a actual repeal of Obamacare. As I was saying, it leaves in place many key parts of Obamacare. So from the Hill, senators, you passed Obamacare repeal bill, only bill in 2015. Do it again. Like the version that passed in 2015, the current bill includes repeal of Obamacare taxes and mandates and phases out the subsidies and Medicaid expansion over the course of the next 2 years. However, also like the 2015 bill, the current repeal bill won't change Obamacare's regulations on private insurance. Purportedly, that's so bad it can't be considered under rules known as, quote, budget reconciliation, which allow a bill to pass with only a simple majority of votes, instead of needing 60. The limits of what the Senate can do under budget reconciliation have been a stumbling block for Republicans during their health reform effort. It's not clear to what extent insurance regulations can be altered via this process, but Republicans have clearly grown bolder. The repeal and replace bill that passed the House in April of this year, as well as the latest repeal and replace bill under consideration in the Senate, would have included regulatory changes. Specifically, the House allowed states to obtain waivers from two major rules in Obamacare: the, quote, essential health benefits, or federal requirements on what all insurance plans must cover, which included ridiculously absurd things like hair transplants, and the, quote, community rating rule, which limited insurers' ability to price insurance premiums according to health status or risk. Basically, it was on a 1-to-3 ratio, according to sick and healthy people. Insurers were only able to charge, they couldn't charge any more than 3 times what they would charge a healthy person when they're covering a sick person. And sometimes people cost 5 times, sometimes they cost 10 times more. That's just a fact of life. And when you're talking about insurance, which is a business, you just can't operate, when you're under those kind of conditions. So those were obviously two pieces of regulatory failure, 2 prime examples of regulations that were imposed on insurers by Obamacare, by the force of government, that have played a big role in the destruction of the healthcare market. So basically, there was a repeal bill in 2015. Now they are not even willing to necessarily put that forward again. They're trying to push a quote unquote repeal and replacement bill that does have some good things in it. It especially if it contains the amendment by Ted Cruz, which is an amendment that would allow you to be able to pick plans outside of Obamacare, as long as the insurers provided at least one plan that was compliant with Obamacare. But of course, all the Republicans, many of the Republicans in the Senate, the Rhino Republicans, if you will, Republican in name only, they are all, opposing that amendment. They've all got issues with that amendment, which is just a common sense thing. But really what needs to happen is obviously the mandate, the taxes, all that needs to be repealed, but as much of the regulations that can be repealed need to. And they just need to try to pack as much in a repeal as they possibly can without needing 60 votes. And I mean, I think we're at a point where, if we need to just get rid of the stinking filibuster rule, the stupid 60-vote filibuster rule for something like this, I mean, this is the type of situation where this is what the nuclear option is meant for. Is a situation like this, it's just ridiculous that we're having to be confined, by the obstructionist Democrats at this point, who just don't have any interest, in my point of view, in actually benefiting the country at this point. They're simply just trying to undermine the Republicans in Congress and the president and his administration as much as possible. And to give you a big bird's eye view, a 1,000-foot view of how destructive Obamacare has been to the insurance market, I bring you to Zero Hedge. Obamacare implosion. Last major healthcare provider pulls out of Iowa, leaving no options in 2018. The latest evidence of Obamacare's implosion comes from its stunning collapse in the state of Iowa in just a matter of a few weeks. Early last month, 2 of Iowa's 3 remaining healthcare providers, and this article was a couple months old, Aetna and Wellmark, announced they would not participate in the state's exchange in 2018. And this is in the individual market. Now remember, Obamacare was designed for people in the individual market, not people who have group insurance through their work. It was designed for people in the individual market. And these are the exact people that are suffering the most now by the failures of Obamacare. It's just amazing. Per Bloomberg, quote, earlier today, we informed the appropriate federal and state regulators that Aetna will not participate in the Iowa Individual Public Exchange for 2018 as a result of financial risk and an uncertain outlook for the marketplace. Aetna spokesman T.J. Crawford said in an email, quote, we are still evaluating Aetna's 2018 individual product presence in our remaining states. On Monday, Wellmark Inc. said it planned to give up on the Iowa Obamacare market in 2018. Wellmark is one of the state's largest insurers. Those decisions left the overwhelming majority of Iowans with just one insurance option for 2018, Medica. That is, until today, when Medica also announced that, quote, due to instability in the market, they too would likely have to pull out of Iowa in 2018, per the Des Moines Register. Medica, a Minnesota-based insurer, released a statement suggesting it was close to following 2 larger carriers and deciding not to sell such policies in Iowa for 2018 due to instability in the market. Thanks to Obamacare, obviously. Without, quote, without swift action by the state or Congress to provide stability to Iowa's individual insurance market, Medica will not be able to serve the citizens of Iowa in the manner and breadth that we do today. We are examining the potential of limited offerings, but our ability to stay in the Iowa insurance market in any capacity is in question at this point, the company's statement said. Medica's exit is expected to leave roughly 70,000 Iowans without a single option to purchase a personal health insurance policy in 2018, even if they wanted to. Unless a replacement carrier is found, the change also means moderate-income Iowans in most counties will not be able to use the Affordable Care Act subsidies to help pay premiums for private insurance. In other words, you're screwed. Humana has already announced they won't offer marketplace plans in 2018, a move which will result in thousands of people in Tennessee not having a single health insurance option starting in 1/1/18. Meanwhile, Anthem has also signaled they may exit all exchanges next year as well, which would leave another 250,000 consumers with no health insurance options. And the vast majority of states nowadays only have 1 or 2 options available in the individual market. And now it's getting down to the point where there's 0, even when there's only 1 left, Medica, when you've got a monopoly on the market. Obamacare sucks so bad. It is designed to fail. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. One of the key architects of it, Jonathan Gruber, went around on college campuses giving speeches saying that it was because of the stupidity of the American voter that they were able to get the thing to pass. I mean, for crying out loud, Obama said, famously, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. It was a total lie. He said he was going to save, families $2,000 a year on average on their healthcare plans. Premiums have gone through the roof. People's deductibles have shot, went sky high. The actual coverage that people can get has actually gotten subpar in some cases, in many cases, and so you've just got this system through the regulations through the subsidies, through the taxes, this burdensome, over-regulated, bloated system that is an absolute drain on the, the free market, and sort of market influences that allow for, competition and allow for higher quality and lower prices. That is just completely snubbed out by Obamacare, and that was by design. Again, the whole point of Obamacare was to implode the healthcare system and install what's called single payer. Single payer is where it would basically be Medicaid for everybody, Medicaid for all. So the single payer would be the government paying for everybody's healthcare insurance. That is the absolute worst option you could possibly have. People like to say, oh, look at, Canada, for example. Everybody has health coverage. Yeah, and people wait on waiting lists for weeks or months, sometimes even when they have serious conditions like cancer. The actual quality of care, the quality of the healthcare itself is subpar. Look at the VA, for example. We actually had over 100 people last year in LA, on the LA VA system, die because they were on waiting lists. That's a single-payer system for you. That's government-run healthcare. That is... the government sucks at everything, right? Do people think the DMV is efficient? Why do people think the government, if they can't run the DMV efficiently, what makes people think that they can run healthcare? It was something that is massive, 1/6 of our economy. A bunch of bureaucrats in Washington are the last people you want running your healthcare system. And that brings me now to the National Review. So Obamacare was a big expansion in Medicaid. That was the vast majority of the people that were put on the Obamacare marketplace were put on through Medicaid. Medicaid is a failure. The Medicaid fund is going to go broke in basically like 13 years or something like that. That's from their own, the shareholders' own estimates. That's not just me saying that. It's going to go broke. It is a failing system. That's not to say that we shouldn't have any kind of social safety net. That's not what I'm saying. But the current Medicaid system we have now is a total failure, and it's a tool by politicians to get votes. Just like so many things nowadays. So this from National Review. California's Medicaid spending crisis. On Tuesday, the Los Angeles Times editorial board accused Republicans of planning to, quote, slash Medicaid and, quote, devastate Los Angeles County, where 40% of the population are Medicaid recipients. 40% of the population. Their projection reflects a sentiment shared by many across the state. About 14 million Californians, more than 1/3 of the state, are Medi-Cal recipients. That's their state's Medicaid program. Nearly 19% of the nationwide Medicaid population. Nearly 19% in California. And the nearly $100 billion program is 2/3 funded by the federal government. By me and you. Since 2014, when the ACA went into full effect, California has added 5 million people to the Medi-Cal rolls, 3.7 million of them under the ACA's expanded eligibility criteria. And remember, under Obamacare, you had situations where you had people that were, in some cases, asset millionaires, people who aren't, don't actually have a income revenue of, millions of dollars, but they've got assets that value them, that are valued in the millions. This is just an example. I mean, the expansion of Medicaid, they expanded it as much as humanly possible, the eligibility requirements, and sort of made it to where they could sort of, cast as wide of a net as possible and get as many people to take advantage of this program as they possibly could. And take advantage of it, they did, and they have. and this is so key. This last part here. This encapsulates so much of why Medicaid is a failure. California has managed to contain its Medi-Cal costs so far largely by limiting reimbursements to physicians who see Medi-Cal patients. In other words, by stiffing doctors. California has some of the lowest physician reimbursement rates in the nation, but this has caused other problems. As Medi-Cal enrollment has increased, the number of doctors willing to take Medi-Cal patients has declined. Would you look at that? To 63% of physicians in a voluntary survey conducted by the California Health Care Foundation in 2015, and for methodological reasons, that number is probably high. As of fall, 40% of physicians accounted for 80% of Medi-Cal visits. This situation has intensified California's long-term physician shortage. One-third of California's physicians and nurse practitioners are at least 55 years old. Retirements and rapidly expanding Medi-Cal roles are responsible for the fact that 2 of California's 9 regions currently have so few primary care physicians that they are in violation of California law for mandated care plans. Or for managed care plans, rather, which requires 50 primary care physicians per 100,000 people. So what you've got here is you've got the heavy hand of government coming in and trying to negotiate these, to stiff these doctors basically for treating patients. And you've also got the all the paperwork that they have to deal with, the red tape they have to deal with, when dealing with the government and taking on these Medicaid patients, and it just becomes too much of a burden for them. It makes it not worth it for the doctors. So they begin refusing to actually take new Medicaid recipients, and you see this across the country. It's something like less than, on average, something like less than, or about 40% of doctors, only about 40% of doctors in the country right now are taking additional, additional people on Medicaid, and it's something around what it said here, about 60, somewhere probably about 60 to 70% of doctors, probably closer to 60% of doctors are continuing to work on the patients that they actually already retroactively had. So they grandfathered in people, but they're not taking new people in many cases. So it's a big problem. It's a system that is absolutely failing, a system that is unsustainable, and there are real options, real things that we can do to create a more market-based healthcare system that can actually provide the best quality healthcare to the largest amount of people for the lowest price. And that should be the goal. That is not what you're going to get with, certainly not with Obamacare, and absolutely not with single payer. No way in hell. So yeah, right now we got this crazy battle going on in the Senate. They're saying that they can hope to basically vote on something by the end of this week. So I'll definitely be following that situation as it unfolds. It seems like at this point we're probably either going to get the three things could happen. Either they won't vote for anything, or they will move forward with the replacement bill that is floating around and being changed up on a daily basis. Or they will go for, more than likely, the skinny repeal, which will get rid of, again, the taxes and the mandates, but more than likely won't do a lot to actually cut into the regulations. So we'll see what happens. Definitely, I think it's been good that President Trump has actually come out. He's shown quite a bit of leadership. He's really putting a lot of pressure on senators to to do the right thing. He's saying that the Republicans have used this issue as a way to get votes, as a way to get elected, and that this is a gigantic promise that they've made to their voters time and time again. Of course, they already have put through a repeal bill through the House and Senate, and that's when of course it was Obama, so they knew it would get vetoed. Now they've got a president that will likely sign whatever gets to his desk, and now it's this big issue, and they're falling over each other, trying to scramble around and do Lord knows what at this point. But yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy situation. For sure, we need to get rid of Obamacare. That's definitely something that goes without saying. So hopefully the Republicans in Congress, hopefully they can actually grow a spine and do what they've been promising voters, for the last 8 years or so. That would be great. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe. Please, leave me a comment if you would like to. I would enjoy that. Also, if you would like to listen to the audio version of this, I'll have that on SoundCloud. And if you'd like to follow me on social media, I'll have the link for my Twitter and my Facebook in the description. And I'll also have the link to my SoundCloud page in the description as well. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful day, and may the force be with you.